Welcome back. Today we will be looking at a church being sued by family for damages from CSA. So think of it this way, in a Jehovah's Witness family, let's say your child was abused by an elder and someone in responsibility in the congregation, an elder, that would be similar to a priest. So 13 years old, you don't believe your child, or maybe it doesn't come out. In this case, it doesn't come out. The child hides it, and the child gets into drugs, and later gets into serious drugs, gets disfellowship, so the child is shunned, and the child gets into drugs, heroin, and takes a fatal dose of heroin, and that's it, lights out. Now that's many years later. The child's 30 years old. And then upon attending the funeral, you find out that there was another victim who was abused by the same elder. Another victim. And you found out your son was a victim of CSA. What would you do? How would you feel? Well, that's what we're going to read about. This is a case we're looking at. And it's in Australia. It's a civil case over a Cardinal Pell abuse allegations allowed to proceed against a church in Australia. Now, these court systems are all united all over the earth for the most part. We find courts in Pennsylvania quoting the Australian Commission, courts in the UK quoting this. All over the world, the court systems are working together to snuff out CSA. And they're being lenient, more lenient, allowing now family members to get involved in lawsuits. So here's the article. Canberra, Australia, an Australian court on Friday allowed a civil case to proceed against the Catholic archdiocese involving child sex abuse allegations against the late Cardinal George Pell. He died. So the Victoria State Court of Appeal in Melbourne refused to hear the church's challenge to a judge's ruling that a father, identified in the court document, was entitled to sue for damages for the nervous shock he suffered when he learned of the allegations his son had been abused. And Pell was the third highest ranking cleric in the Vatican when he was convicted in 2018 of sexually abusing two 13-year-old choir boys in Melbourne Cathedral, 1996, when Pell was an archbishop. So Pell spent 13 months in prison before the convictions were overturned on an appeal, and he maintained his innocence until his death in Rome in January. Now, Victoria law prohibits media from identifying the victims for these offenses, so it prevents the father from being named. So we go on to talk here. The father blames the alleged abuse for his son's use of illicit drugs from age 14 and fatal heroin overdose at age 30 in 2014. Now, the surviving choir boy has testified that he decided to report Pell to the police in 2015 after that funeral, after attending the friend's funeral. And the dead man had apparently not told anyone of the allegations. Now, the father is suing the Catholic Archdiocese of Melbourne and Pell's estate in the Victoria Supreme Court. So this is a big message. If you're an elder and you've been involved in CSA, you could lose your estate. Even if you die, your estate can be sued in Australia anyways. And it won't be long. This will be happening all over the earth. Now, the father, and he's also suing the church, right? So the church had argued that the father was not entitled to sue because he was a so-called secondary victim who was not abused personally. So the father's lawyer, Gabriel Verhagen, said in a statement, the church should be doing everything in its power to compensate victims rather than washing their hands of the responsibility. And that's what the Jehovah's Witness organization is doing all over the earth. Now, in allowing the case to go to trial, the appeals court judges ruled the church's grounds for appeal did not have enough prospect of success to warrant further consideration. So the father claims he suffered a nervous shock on being told by the police. So it's like the police showed up at his door and said, hey, did you know your son was a CSA victim? He was raped by the Catholic archbishop, this Pell. Yeah, this is what happened. So this is how he learned about it, because the other choir boy went to the police and told the police everything. And so the father states he suffered financial loss because of medical expenses and a loss of earning capacity because of his suffering from several psychological conditions. And the father also claims the church is liable for his injury and his son's alleged abuse. His son's not around, but he's suing for it. And this is what has to happen, folks. The standard of proof for abuse allegations in Australian civil court is lower than in the criminal court system where Pell was tried. And the AP asked the surviving former choir boy's lawyer on Friday whether he had taken civil action, but it hasn't happened. So criminal action happened. The guy, the priest, did do 18 months or so in jail. Then he died in Rome. And even after he died, they're still suing his estate. And they're going to be suing the church now. And the courts are saying, yeah, go for it. You see, the churches have to be held accountable. Here, all these years, we've been going to these churches, trusting and trusting and trusting, and they're supposed to be sitting in God's seat. But we know that's not true. These churches are hiding CSA and what knows what else. And in the Jehovah's Witness religion, it's compounded by all the disfellowshipping and shunning. It is definitely not a good religion to have people running up and down the blocks peddling these Watchtower magazines that promote this stuff. So that's what we're doing, folks, on this side of the fence. We are publicizing these things. We are showing people, especially in Australia now, family can get involved in certain situations to sue the church for damages. So, folks, that's the rest of the story. And until next time, keep living your life with love. Bye for now.